Congratulations on taking a step forward and deciding to actually learn a programming language. That takes a lot of effort and a lot of work, but it's going to be really easy. Thanks to Python, we are learning one of the easiest programming languages in the world. Really hard to master, but really easy to use. And I'm going to be covering every single detail that's going to help you get started with learning how to code from the basics all the way to the professional aspects of this language. And this will help you prepare with creating your own kind of programs, which will eventually be used for concepts such as machine learning and artificial intelligence, or automation, daily task automation, bot creation, and plenty of other real use cases. So once again, congrats on acquiring this course. We will start from the very bare basics of Python, and we're going to work our way up to the most advanced features of the language. And at any point of this course, feel more than free to leave a question in the question section down below. I'll do my best to answer it as soon as possible. I'm there to help. So with that being said, I hope you're excited as much as I am to start learning Python. What are the requirements for this course? And to answer that as simply as possible, there aren't really any requirements. We're going to start this all from scratch. And not only, it doesn't matter which computer you use, whether it's a MacBook, a Windows computer, a Linux-based computer, it doesn't matter as long as you have an internet connection and you have a computer to type on. There are even some people who would go so far as to use their mobile phone. There are some applications you can use on your phone that allow you to actually use Python code, but to actually get the most of this learning experience, I recommend you have a normal laptop or a normal computer where you can download a few programs such as PyCharm and Python, so we can run it in a code editor such as this one. And that's all you need to get started with creating Python code. Now, before we get started with actually programming in Python, we need to install Python, and we also need to install a code editor. And my recommendation is that we get started with PyCharm. It's one of the easiest code editors to use if you're getting started with Python. And there are plenty of others, of course. There's Visual Studio Code and so on. But in this example, we're going to go ahead and download Python with PyCharm. So the best way to download Python is on python.org. It is an open source and free language to download, so anyone who tries to sell this to you, you should definitely not trust. Go ahead and go to python.org, and I'm going to leave a link to this in the resources section on this Udemy course, so you can just click on that if you want. And you want to go to downloads, and the best thing you can do is pick the most recent download over here. So we're going to be downloading Python 3.10, and that's the one that I'm currently using. At the time of watching this video, there might be Python 3.11, so just feel free to take whatever happens over here. And you can see a full list of the downloads here, but we're going to click on the one right here. And if you're on Windows, there's going to be a Windows version, so go ahead and click on it. It's going to install the package. When you open the package, it's going to say, do you want to do this and that? And it's going to tell you whether you want to install it, and you just click continue on everything. It's just a normal kind of installation. So here we can go ahead and accept. It's going to install it on Macintosh HD, which is my drive for my MacBook, and we'll just continue, and you will just click on install, and then Python will be on your computer from that point forward. But I already have that installed. So next we need to go to PyCharm, and the best way to do this is just to type in PyCharm on Google, and it's going to take you to a JetBrains webpage. And here we want to go ahead and click on download. And there are going to be two versions. There's the professional version, which allows you to easily work with HTML, JavaScript, and SQLite. And here we're going to go ahead and select the community edition, which is for pure Python development. It's 100% free and it's open source, works on Intel and Apple Silicon. So you can use anything you want, depending on which kind of computer you have. You can also go here and see what they have. And just click on download. It's going to start the download, and I'm going to cancel that, but it's going to add it to your computer, follow the instructions, and when you're done with that, go ahead and open PyCharm. And when you open PyCharm for the first time, it's probably not going to look like this because I have a lot of projects, but what you will be able to find really easily is the New Project button. So go ahead and click on New Project, and here it will help us configure all the details we need to start our new project. Now, what's important is that we start a new environment using virtual environment, and we need to pick a location for this virtual environment, which is created by default. And what's really important is the base interpreter. That is the Python program that we installed. So in general, it's going to be put here automatically, but otherwise, as you can see, there is a file path that you need to find, which is library frameworks python.framework versions 3.10 bin python 3. And that's the one I'm going to be using for the entirety of this course, and you can look for it by clicking on the three dots. I have Python 3.11 as well. It's inside my versions folder in the Python framework folder, which is inside my library. It's very similar on Windows. What's important is you find the correct path to the Python file that you downloaded and that you have it ready for PyCharm. And we're going to go ahead and untoggle the create a main.py welcome script and click on create. And this will allow us to create our very first Python project in PyCharm. And there's one thing that we're missing now, and that is our main file. So go ahead and right click on that folder, click on new, and click on Python file. And we want to type in main. And what this is going to do is create an entry point for our program, so we can write code in here now, and it's going to execute the Python code. Make sure it's inside the main folder and not this virtual environment that's highlighted in yellow, so that we can find it easily. But with that being done, that's actually all the setup that's required to get started with developing in Python. Of course, feel free to ask if there's any problem with your installation. I'd be happy to help. Otherwise, let's move on to the next lesson. Print something to the console, and you'll understand what all of this means as we create the program. So here we'll go ahead and type in print, And inside here, we are allowed to insert a argument. And an argument is anything that it can use to actually execute the function. So for example, I'm going to go over this later in the course, of course, but we have something that's called a string, which is text, and that can be defined by quotation marks or by single quotation marks. And this text will be printed to the console, which means it's going to display in the lower part of the screen as soon as we run the script. So let's go ahead and print this is some text. And we're going to leave it there. We're just going to go ahead and right click on main and run main. And you're going to see in the console that it will execute this line of code, and it's going to just show it down here with a process finished with exit code 0 message. And this in many cases means that all our code went well. If we had something wrong, such as if we're missing a parentheses, it's going to give us an error and it's going to finish with exit code 1. So for the majority of cases, we are really looking for exit code 0 when we are executing something in Python. But congratulations, you've created your very first script in Python. Of course, we're going to get into much further depth with all of this. This is just to show you that it's actually up and running and that you can already print something to your computer. And this can actually be a lot of things. It can be a number. For example, let's get rid of this. We can say 100. And it will print 100. It can print lots of things, and we use that usually to display results in Python. But with that being done, let's move on to the next lesson. In the previous lesson, we went ahead and printed something to the console as our first program. And in this lesson, I want to clarify that Python is a very strict language when it comes to syntax. And syntax is just essentially another term for how the language is written and what the computer can understand when you're typing in Python. For example, if we say something such as say 100, Python will not understand what this is because it's not part of the native syntax. And I mean, it has to follow a certain set of rules for Python to understand it. And one of these rules is case sensitivity, which means right now you can see we said print 100, but if we do something silly such as print 100 with a capital P because we're feeling a bit more grammatically correct, it's not going to understand that. Python is very strict. I mean, there's a different Unicode for the capital P and the lowercase p, so the computer reads both of them completely differently. So it's really important you pay attention to the grammar and you pay attention to when you're programming with Python, because Python does keep that into account. So sometimes you're going to create some programs that have some errors that say syntax error, and that's because you're not respecting the rules of Python. And we're going to run into a few of those as we go on with this course, but it's just something you need to keep in mind that when you're creating anything in Python, it has to respect these rules. And one of the biggest beginner mistakes is not respecting the capitalization rule. So someone would type in print with an I there, and they wouldn't understand why this isn't printing. If we run the program, it's going to give us an error, such as a name error. And of course, and also, if we don't respect that we have two parentheses, for example, it's going to give us a syntax error, and it's going to tell us exactly what's going on there. So it's very important you also read the error message down here. But syntax errors are usually the easiest errors to fix because they're just something we forgot in general. For example, again, if we forget something such as a parentheses and we do something like that, it's not going to understand what we're doing because we're missing a lot of syntax. It's quite obvious we want this to print 100 to the console, but Python doesn't know that. In more recent versions of Python, you do get better error messages, but in general, it should just be quite clear that we're missing some parentheses here, and it says even right here, print 100 is missing parentheses. So keep in mind that when you're programming in Python, you need to be very strict with the instructions that you're giving to the computer. Just like speaking any other language, it needs to follow a certain set of rules for the other person to understand what you're trying to say, otherwise it just becomes gibberish. Now, there's one very important detail I forgot to mention in the previous lessons, and that is how to run your code. There are several ways to do this, and one way you'll notice me doing it a lot is by a keyboard shortcut, which I myself created. So right there, I held down Command plus R, and it ran the code in the console. Another way to do this is to right-click on the file and tap on Run on Main. And finally, with the correct file selected, you can go ahead and click on this run over here. In this video, I'm going to go ahead and show you how you can set up the shortcut, because I find that saves the most time when running code. And actually, I don't know if this is a default. I do remember having to set it up, so maybe it's a default now. But let's go ahead and open up the preferences. And in here, we want to look for shortcuts. Or actually, let's go to key map. And we'll have a key map here. And inside the key map, we want to go ahead and type in run, because here we'll be able to find out where we need to run the code. And you'll notice that there's a section here called run with a play button. And what's important is that you tap on this. You tap on it 2 times and add a keyboard shortcut. And I would remove any other keyboard shortcuts that are already there to make it a bit more clear. But here you can go ahead and add whatever kind of shortcut you want to run the code. You can go ahead and say shift underscore if you want to run the code like that. And I'm going to go ahead and click on OK. Now if we actually go ahead and click on OK, we will have that as an option. So I will just close the terminal, and now when I go ahead and hold shift plus underscore, it's going to run the code for us, and that is an added shortcut. So that's just something to keep in mind when you're programming, is that you can easily edit any kind of shortcut you want, and I find this to be the most useful shortcut you will use when programming in Python. Now, one thing that I'll be showing you in Python that is fairly important is how you can write comments in this code editor. And comments in general are just there to remind someone how something is being done, or to just create a self-reminder. And